Hi guys, Laura Rumble here. This week's topic is cutting tools. We've got three main kinds. We've got punches, we've got metal dies and cut files which you use on a die cutting machine. I don't have any punches, so I'm going to leave one of the others to talk you through them later on. I can talk you through metal dies and cutting machines. This layout was done with two different metal dies. So you've got the butterfly here and you've got this leaf sprig here. I have simply repeatedly cut the same motif, layered them up and then embellished with three butterflies. This layout again was made with metal dies. I've got some stars and some circles. Again, I've repeated shapes and stacked them up for maximum effect. Then we move on to cut files, which you use on an electronic cutting machine. You may have heard of Silhouette Cameo and Portrait, Cricut, or a Scan and Cut by Brother. These are computerized. Whatever you tell it to cut from your computer, it will cut. You can use your fonts from your computer and create custom cut files. You can buy cut files. This is one that I've designed and sold at Pretty My Page. You can cut on several different kinds of material. Cardstock, papers, pattern papers, vellum, acetate, fabric, all sorts. This is another one that I've designed. I've cut the same design 4 times, 3 on white and 1 on black, and I've stacked them together so you get a nice chunky effect. With the cutting machines you can scale your design to any size. You've also got options to make holes to do stitching. I don't know if you can see that white on white there. You can create holes in whatever kind of design you want and then sew by hand. You can also use your machine with a pen or a pencil to draw. So this here looks like it's been printed. It's actually been drawn by my Silhouette Cameo and then cut out. But before we go any further, I really want to say you don't need any of this stuff. It's a similar effect, and I've hand cut these circles. I simply drew round, I think it was a reel of cotton, and cut them out. So whilst these are fantastic things to have, don't feel that you need them to create quality layouts. Don't feel that you have to have them to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. You really don't. You can achieve some wonderful effects without the machinery. In this little section I'm going to take you through die cutting with metal dies. So I have a Gemini, which is an electronic die cutter. You can get manual ones. You have a crank on side that you crank round, which move the rollers inside, which squash your die, your paper and your cutting plates together to cut shapes. I can't use one of them. I don't have the strength and anyway, so I have an electronic one which does the job for me, does all the work for me. Now you need, along with your die cutting machine, either electronic or manual. And you can get small machines which have a cutting size of about that big, I think is the smallest. Plus you can get them all the way up to bigger than A4. This cuts about A5 size. Along with the actual machine, you will need a cutting plate. So my cutting sandwich for going through here is a cutting plate, a plastic shim, a magnetic mat, and hang on, let me get them in the right order, and then another cutting plate on top. Now, as you can see, the plates get bashed up. The metal die cuts into the plate each time you go through. The first time you use a die cutting machine, or at least the first time I used a die cutting machine, I thought I'd broken it because the noise of the metal die going into the plastic was, well, rather more than I was expecting, let's put it that way. Your plates are consumable, so you will need to replace these as you cut, and they get marked like this. They can start affecting the quality of the cut that you get as you use them. So it's a good idea to keep a spare new cutting plate on hand. The magnetic bit is brilliant for keeping your die in place. Oh, well, that wasn't a very good example, was it? It keeps it in place while you run it through. A lot of people also use just a little bit of washi to keep your metal die in place. So we move on to the dies. You can get all sorts of sets from all sorts of manufacturers. I haven't found a duff die yet. I've got ranging from ones from the pound shop to Pink Fresh Studio ones, which are, you know, the highest of any quality. You get all sorts of different kinds of metal die. These are wafer dies. These ones coordinate with a stamp set. So I have some stamped out images from, this is Simon Says Stamp. And you then match the die up to the stamped images. Okay, so what I've done here is I've kept the dies together, thinking that it might save me some time rather than lining up the dies individually, but actually that's not going to work by the look of things. So some dies come joined together with these tiny little metal struts, and you have to separate them yourself, which is usually quite easy by just bending them backwards and forwards. You then end up with quite sharp, spiky bits of metal, which I take care of with my clippers. So just a normal pair of DIY wire cutters. Cutting them as close as possible. You still get slightly rough edges, so I have a metal file which I then just take off any sharp bits. And there you are. That's good to go now. I don't like dies that come joined together because I have to do that to them. I would much rather they come ready separated. This is a nesting set. So you've got shapes nesting inside of each other from Heffy Doodle that came ready cut, and quite frankly that's so much better. You can get alphabets, you can get nesting shapes, cover plates. So this is a cover plate as well, which cuts an entire panel of card. You can get little individual shapes, all sorts of things. They're not always silvery, they come in all sorts of different colours of metal. So I'm going to show you how we cut that one. And I'm also going to cut cover plate. I've got some scraps of cardstock just to show you how we do it. Even though I have a magnetic mat, I like to just pop a little bit of washi tape to keep my die and my card in place so it doesn't move whilst it's going through the machine. Do I have a large enough scrap? I think this one will do. Right, so at the moment this is the cutting side, and that is facing onto your card. You do not want to put it down this way because it will then cut into your mat. So die smooth side down on the magnetic surface, card on top. Cutting plate, plastic shim, magnetic sheet, and I'm going to use the new cutting plate on top. There is also metal shims which you can put in the sandwich if you're cutting a very intricate die and you're having trouble getting a clean cut. By putting a metal shim in, you can improve your chances of getting a good cut. There's also embossing mats. These are squidgy. Even if you put that in your sandwich in the right order, you will prevent it from cutting, but it will still leave an impression. So you can get really nice embossed effects. I have forgotten which order the plates and the mat need to go in. I will look that up in a minute. Let's run this through the machine first. So it's a very simple machine. It's got an on-off. The light comes on when it's on. And we simply send the machine through. Anything within the plates will cut, anything hanging out will not. Right, let's put the machine out of the way. This is the first time I've cut this cover plate, and perhaps using a shim would have been an idea. But the pieces will pop out. As you see, a fair few of the pieces have just fallen out by themselves, and that's usually what would happen. This is an intricate die though, so it hasn't happened. This little die just knock the pieces out. It's helpful to have a pokey tool. You can use a pin or a needle if you don't have a pokey tool. And that's a perfect example of a die cut shape. I'm just going to clean out any pieces that are stuck in the die. Line it up again by just sliding it into place, holding it with a couple of pieces of washi. This time I'm going to pop my shim in the sandwich. Cutting side up onto the plate. And through we go again. There we go, perfect cut. Here I'm just going to whiz you quickly through me using the embossing mat. I got out my instruction manual, which comes in very useful, and it tells me that it's exactly the same as cutting, except I put the squishy embossing mat underneath the top cutting plate. This is not really something I do very often, and I need to have a play with it and see about settings and shims and things. You can get some really great effects. I've seen other people getting really lovely embossed card. This one, I felt like the sandwich was a little bit too thick, and although it's very pretty, if you look closely, some of the card has cracked slightly, so it's something I need to explore more. Earlier on I mentioned anything outside of the cutting plate will not cut, and you can use that to your advantage with something called partial die cutting. So here I'm going to make a circle embellishment. I'm just die cutting a circle first, and then I'm going to take a butterfly die and tape it onto my circle. I'm going to use a piece of washi as a marker, so I'm lining it up with where I do want it to cut, flipping that over onto the magnetic mat, and then I will put my top cutting plate only up to that line of washi. Everything under the plate will cut, and the half of the butterfly that's not under the plate will not cut. I struggled to get it in my machine here, but that was user error. So I now have half a butterfly cut from my circle. I'm going to line the washi tape up on the other side of the butterfly's body, line the die up with the first cut, pop the plate back on top, but so that it covers the other half of the butterfly, and cut the butterfly's second wing. Now I'm going to be honest with you and say that I've not really seen any scrapbookers doing this. I've seen a lot of card makers using partial die cutting, but not so much the scrapbookers. There must be ways that we can use this in scrapbooking. I think this turned out to be a really cute embellishment, and I'll attach a photo of the finished layout using it. I think this is something that scrapbookers need to explore, because look at that, it's lovely. In this section of the lesson I'm going to talk you through Silhouette Cameo, which is an electronic die cutting machine. Silhouette is the brand, Cameo is the make of machine. Cameo's cut 12 inches wide. You can get a smaller one called a Silhouette Portrait, which cut as wide as an A4. There are also other brands. You can get Crickets, you can get Brother Scan and Cuts. I don't have them, so I can't talk you through them. I can talk you through the Silhouette. Can I show you? You've got your on and off button here. You've got a connection to link it to your computer, one for the mains, and you can also use a USB. So if I switch it on, you've got your screen here which tells you what's going on. If we open up and I tip it like this, you can see how the thing works. So this is your feed bar or your roll bar, which holds your mat in place. This is your cutting housing, I think they call it, I'm not sure, which holds your blade. Your blade is controlled by this housing. Your consumables for an electronic cutting machine are mats. This is a cutting mat. It has a temporary stick on its surface. You fix your cardstock that you're going to cut to the mat, like so, and insert that into the machine and send it to cut. That's a Silhouette branded mat. This is a Cricket mat, and I think you'll find a lot of people say that these Cricket mats last a lot longer than the Silhouette ones. And one tip and trick I can give you is if you have a brand new mat, it can be too sticky so that it holds your paper and doesn't let go. You don't want that after you've gone to the trouble of cutting something, to have the mat not release it. This mat won't even release its release paper. Here we go. So there's obviously far too much stick on here to use it like this. It would ruin your cut file. You can get around that by taking a t-shirt and just sticking it to the mat a couple of times, peeling it off. Until you're left with a more manageable amount of stick on the mat. With the Silhouette Cameo or the Silhouette Portrait, you work in something called Silhouette Studio, which is the software that comes with the machine. In fact, you can download it for free even if you don't have a machine, and I'd recommend doing that if you were thinking about getting a machine. Download the software and have a play and just see how it all works. You can draw basic shapes, you can type things, you can change the fonts. Here I'm just going to play with the character spacing. Spread the letters out slightly before I weld them. Welding is something that you need to do. At the moment, those are 5 individual shapes. You can see each letter is an individual shape. If you ungroup them, you can move each letter individually. And if you highlight over them and weld them, they now make one shape. So you've got, that will cut as one piece. You can also put shapes around your words to make custom ephemera. I'm just going to show you putting a star around this hello. I'm going to highlight both of them and click Make Compound Path. Now that is one design that you can move around and resize to whatever size you want to cut it at. Annette's Designs, Annette has been kind enough to give us a free cut file to use this week, which is this Houses on the Hill, Hill and House. I'm not sure what it's called. It's very pretty though. I'm not going to use it as one piece. I am going to chop it up. In the menu on the right hand side, I've selected the knife tool, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a knife tool. You drag it across what you want to cut and it will cut it. I had slight issues. My cut file has double lines. I'm not sure why, but it does. So I'm going to deal with them. It's a bit of an odd thing to happen, but you know, nothing is not overcomeable. That's good English for you, isn't it? If you double click on your shape, you get what's called the points up. Points are the squares that you briefly saw, and we'll see again in a little while. Those things. Now I'm just sorting out my double lines, deleting what I don't want, moving them out the way. Now I'm going to make that, I'm going to delete that extra little bit. I'm going to make that into a compound path eventually. First of all, I'm going to play with these points. So when you chop a bit off, you might get a jaggedy edge, and you want to smooth it out. So clicking on the points and moving them slightly allows you to do that. You can also use the points to manipulate fonts and things like that. You have to make them into a compound path first, rather than just being able to manipulate a font straight out. Now I'm bringing that chopped up piece of Annette's design onto another page, and this is what I'm going to cut today and use in my layout. Now I like a few of them, so I'm going to duplicate it. Then I'm also going to open the replicate panel and mirror it so I get an exact opposite. I'm going to line them up down the top right of the page, and then I'm going to move on to my title. Now I'm going to do a page about hay fever. The title is going to be Hello Hay Fever. So I'm getting the hello. I don't want the star though, because I don't feel that matches with the floral theme that I'll be going for. So I'm going to do the same thing, type it up, select my font, play with the character spacing, and then weld them together. I'm also going to offset them. This font is a bit narrow in places, and offsetting it fattens up those lines and makes them easier to cut and easier to get off the mat once they've been cut. So I've just offset by, I think it was 0.2 or 0.3 of a millimetre, so a tiny amount, but it makes a big difference. I'm then going to offset that by 2 millimetres and make a shadow. I have deleted the tiny parts because, again, there's no point in trying to cut tiny parts. I haven't got patience for that. So I'm situating my title in the top left and my shadow in the bottom right. I'm also going to put a background cut file on the page to cut. I'm going to load up my cutting mat to cut what we've just looked at on the computer. I'm going to stick with just using white to cut examples, and I have cut my pieces to size, and I'm going to use the grid on the mat to place my pieces of paper. So this will be for the bed of roses. This will be for the flowers from Annette's cut file that I cropped and chopped. This will be for the hello, which will be the title, or part of the title maybe. I also got a piece of vellum which I'm going to pop down here to cut the shadow for the title. Now obviously this is much thinner than the cardstocks that we're using here, so the blade will need to be set at a different level. It's a level 1 for vellum, and I use 3 or 4 depending on how new my blade is for cutting card. So I'm going to go over and show you that now. Now this is a bit of a weird setup. I'm kneeling on the floor next to the camera. I hope this is going to record. You need a fair amount of space either side of your Cameo. If you've got a 12-inch mat this way, you've got a 12-inch mat that could come out the other side if you're cutting down this end of the page. So the only place I can do that in my craft room is on my floor. So I'm lining that up and pressing load cut mat. Just going to check my blade. It's on 4, which is perfect for the cardstocks that I'm going to cut. I'm now going to pop over to my computer and press send. I'm just going to move that vellum piece off and cut the card. I'm using 3 different types of card and they're textured and they still cut beautifully. I'm using cardstock plain as the preset option and I'm going to send that to the machine. When that's finished cutting, you press unload. That ejects your mat, and then you have your cut files ready to use. Sometimes what's left on the mat is very usable. In this case I cut this hexagon cut file from Pretty My Page, and what was left on the paper, there we go, there's something contrasting to show you, was all of these little hexagons, which I thought was far too good to waste. So I've picked it up with, this is essentially sticky back plastic, but it's low tack and it's temporary tack. So similar to the stick on the cutting mat. This is called transfer film or transfer tape or frisket film. I have picked that up off the mat and I can add glue to the backs of these and then transfer them in one go onto a sheet of cardstock to use in a scrapbook. So it's worth knowing if you're investing in a machine and you're going to be cutting background files. Quite often, not all the time, but quite often, you can get sort of a 2-for-1 because what's left on the mat is just as usable as the cut file that is the intended cut, as it were. So this would be the positive and this would be the negatives. When it comes to cleaning your cutting mat off, I just use a gift card and scrape the pieces off and then just pop the release paper back on to protect that stick. So we're now moving into the layout, and I know this is a very long lesson. If you're still with me, thank you. I'm going to die cut several leaves and flowers and sprigs and branches to run with this hay fever theme. I've also got some alpha dies to cut out hay fever. So it's a mix and match title. One part is cut with metal dies and one part is cut with my Cameo. I've cut everything on white cardstock, several different textures of white, but all white. I'm going to add my colour with some mixed media. So that was my 12 by 12 card base, and I just added a few spritzes of white and blue ink. And then all of these little pieces I am going to spritz with different shades of green inks. I'm using a silicone mat, which is a nice surface to work on because it wipes clean really easily. I've also got some scrap paper newsprint sheets around the outside to protect my desk. I do not always do this, and when I don't do it, I always regret it. A quick spritz of water helps get the colour moving a little bit, but these are just cardstock, so they're not going to hold up to too much moisture. Same goes for the background. I haven't used any gesso, and it's not specialist cardstock, so it's not going to take too much moisture without warping and crinkling and possibly even tearing. Now here's the photo. I have light therapy things that go in my nose, which I think help with the hay fever. I use them last thing at night, first thing in the morning, and I caught a glimpse of myself in my mirror as I turned the light out with my prongs on, looking like an absolute I don't know what. So of course, as a scrapbooker, I snapped a picture, and that's what I'm scrapping. So just to explain the craziness, I'm going to layer up my hello onto the vellum shadow and just lay things out and see if it's going to fit how I want things, if I've got enough, whether I want to change my mind completely. And I don't. I go with this. I layer in all my leaves and flowers and itchy bits behind my photo, have the hello to the left and the hay fever underneath, and that's what I'm going to run with. So I'm adhering my photo cluster, which has got a few layers of the embossed paper or cardstock that we did earlier. I had a few other goes at that, trying to get the sandwich right and getting better and worse impressions. I think it's trial and error for the type of cardstock that you want to use, and probably the dye as well. I've added some super sticky double-sided tape around the back. Because I'm using the cardstock that's textured, you want a good sticky adhesive to make sure that everything adheres properly. I'm just popping my leaves and bits around the photo. I'll then get that down on the layout and tuck in a few more pieces in and around. Anywhere where there looks like there might be a bit of a gap or too big of a gap, I'm going to just pop in a couple of extra die cuts. Again, because I'm working with that embossed cardstock, so it's got a deep texture to it, I'm just going to pop something heavy on top of my photo to make sure I get good adhesion. At the moment that hay fever feels a bit floaty down the bottom there, so I'm going to bring it up and overlap it with my leaves. I'm going to use some silicone glue to hold them in place. That is going to give them some dimension, which I would usually use foam adhesive to get, but as I'm sticking over all sorts of leaves and sprigs and things sticking out down there, I felt that the silicone adhesive would be the better option. I'm going to embellish the layout with some sequins in yellows and greens and add my journaling, and that will be it finished. thank you very much for watching. It was a very long one. Thank you if you stuck around for the entirety. And I will see you next month with another lesson. Bye!